name is Andrea Feigl, and I'm the CEO of the Health Finance Institute. And we're one of the co-sponsors of Health at Davos, which is now running for the third year in a row. It started with Eric Troy Pena and myself jumping on the opportunity to partner with unDavos on a group chat. I think it was January 9th, 3 years ago. And we're like, who wants to run a health panel? We're like, we are going to run a health panel. And we did, and it was packed. It was on health equity. And this year, Eric has gotten so famous that the Queen of Belgium requested his presence at the Congress Center. So we're standing in here for him. So. But he has done really great work and has gotten the recognition of the Schwab Fellowship this year, that we're so proud of him. And a few more words about the Health Finance Institute. We're a 501c3 organization in DC. We focus a lot on making the economic case for investing in health, particularly for underserved conditions, such as chronic diseases in low and middle income countries. We also help build blended finance structures, so we give a lot of technical assistance on that. And we believe in the power of partnerships. And so I'm very, very honored to have an amazing panel of health leaders here to talk about climate change and health and the power of public-private partnerships and the need for financing. So there was a study that just came out that the World Economic Forum talked about, that if we invested more in health, we would again stand to save more than $5 trillion, and we could save over 6 million lives, and that there's currently an underinvestment in both climate and health, and that less than 1% of financing in public-private partnerships goes to actually climate and health solutions. So we have a huge gap to address. So, but I'm not the expert here, so I will take a second to introduce my fellow panelists, and one of them is stuck in traffic, but she's on her way. Davos traffic can be quite painful, so apologies about that. So the first panelist to my left is Marie-Ange Sarakayao, and you have an illustrious career and accomplishment in global health. You're Gavi's Chief Resource and Mobilization and Growth Officer, and you have helped Gavi mobilize over $18 billion. The number's probably a lot higher, and you're really a leader in blended finance and global and public-private partnerships. So thank you so much for joining our panel today. And so my first question for you is, and you go to my script because I don't want to throw you off. So, I try to be fair. So from your experience with Gavi and other global initiatives, what lessons have you learned to successfully accomplish public-private partnerships in health and health financing, and how do you apply these in climate and health?
Can you hear me? Okay, perfect. Well, really delighted to be here and to be seeing so many faces, and some of them familiar and some of them new. I think it's really, of course, the lessons of public-private partnership and how they apply to different sectors, in particular climate, are quite interesting, because you can see that there's a lot of similarity between, actually what you see happening in infectious diseases and the type of extreme events or the unpredictability sometimes that you see in climate. And of course, you can draw a lot on this. But starting first on the public-private partnership, I think the lessons in climate are, can be really impressive, because in a sense, and I think we all see it, climate is everybody's business. It's not just one siloed sector. And that's why actually you are all here. We come from different walks of life or businesses, and we experience it differently. So it's really by bringing communities, different people together, different stakeholders, that you can actually try to find solutions. So in Gavi, this has been really important for us because it has really helped us drive results in a sense that acknowledging that what's happening in health is dependent on, for example, having affordable vaccines, but also having the right logistics, transportation. So it's just not a matter of health, and I think it's the same for climate. So this ecosystem and bringing various world together is very important, and I think that's why I was very interesting to be here today, because the climate and health nexus, and it's great. We see now growing. It's fair that a while back the two worlds were meeting separately and more, and under the leadership of many of you in this room now, for example, at the COP, there's a dedicated day, and now we see people talk more about it. So it's there. I think now it's really focusing on what we want to achieve. Having the right businesses, the right way of doing things. So when I bring it to finance, for example, there are so many things that can be applied from health finance now, especially blended finance, that you can apply to climate, because as I said, one of the many things, I'm not a health expert, I came to Gavi actually having worked in development in many different sectors, in infrastructure, in oil and gas. And actually these are really there that I learned the techniques that I've tried to apply in Gavi in health. And in a sense, what you want, especially in a sector where you have unpredictability, you want to be able to bring a regular stream of finance, but that stream of finance can help you also do surge financing, change your assumptions when the extreme weather happens. So that, in Gavi we have what we call vaccine bond, that we use instrument that allow us to have 20-year visibility in terms of financing. So of course, when the outbreaks happen, then you can go to the capital market immediately, get the money. You don't have to go and turn and go to sovereign donors and go through a lengthy process, with clearly something that can benefit climate finance. But most importantly, I think what I would say, and why it's so interesting, is that, we, coming back to my first point and saying that we come to climate in different ways, actually what we have seen more and more, and we have now the data and that are being produced. I think that there was a WHO report published last year showing actually how immunization can actually help protect people's health against climate-sensitive diseases. We actually have in our portfolio vaccines. Half of our portfolio is for vaccine for climate-sensitive diseases, because actually with climate you have vector spreading. And the good thing, and we talk a lot about things we don't have, the good thing is that we have vaccines for it, but it's about making them more available. You all heard about cholera outbreaks. It's definitely a direct link to climate change. You see now dengue spreading. I was this summer in Italy, and there was dengue. This is, definitely linked to climate. So we have vaccines, malaria. So in a sense, we do have these products, and that's also another way of looking to support the sector. So I'll stop there for the time being, but just to leave you with that thought that actually immunization is actually a climate adaptation measure. And if anything, I think it's very important to take it away. And of course, with it come some of the blended finance structures that are directly applicable to climate.
Thank you so much for highlighting this both important work and the nexus between climate and health, and the challenge that we have even more so to address these issues. While I would love to dive into the technicalities of blended finance instruments here, I would like to express a warm welcome to Anil Soni, who is the CEO of the World Health Organization Foundation, WHO Foundation. And just to mention some of your of some of your many accolades, being the CEO of the Clinton Health Access Initiative, having your fingerprints on the formation and the growth of the Global Fund, as well as many other global health initiatives. You're now leading the WHO Foundation. And I just want to mention to you that while you weren't in this room, WHO has been in this room since the beginning of today's event, where we said and highlighted many of the critical functions that WHO has and continues to have and needs to have. So we would just want to say that we're deeply appreciative of the work and also aware of the challenges. So I know that you probably get asked this question a lot, but on the heels of the announcement of the executive order of the intent of the U.S. leaving the WHO, what does this mean for you, and what does this mean for climate and health? And feel free to go into any, what WHO Foundation does, how you approach this, or any aspects of the answer to these questions.
Sure. So thanks for the good wishes. And I think what's most critical in this moment is to ensure that we are providing and amplifying accurate information about the World Health Organization and our global health ecosystem. Because so many of the concerns that are behind recent decisions are based on inaccuracies. So that's a lot of what we are doing this week, right, is talking about the work of the WHO openly. I'm just coming from an event in which we featured a partnership with TikTok, and social media and technology companies are talking about how they need WHO, because if you go online, the way people seek the health-seeking behavior, where they seek health information, it's not you call a doctor anymore, you go online. And so those companies need to work with WHO to make sure that there's accurate information. I was at a dinner last night with the chair of a pharmaceutical company who said, we need WHO, because in order for us to sell our products overseas, or for Gavi to supply many of their vaccines, you need the guidelines and the regulatory function of WHO. In fact, Gavi is a major investor in WHO. That alignment of interests between the work of a technical agency and not just governments and the citizens that those governments represent and have an obligation to protect, but also with philanthropy and business, that alignment of interest is what I'm talking about this week quite a bit. If there is a major reduction of funding, and international organizations have had to experience that recently, ODA retraction is not only about Monday's executive orders, but if there is such a magnitude of reduction, that will require adaptation, and that's going to be really challenging. So I don't want to diminish the impact of that reduction, and it will require that we focus on programs that have highest impact. And climate and health is one of those areas. The WHO last year adopted a 4-year strategy for 2025 through 2028 and had an investment round that was supported by the Brazilian presidency of the G20, which is now moving to South Africa. And they confirmed roughly $8 billion of its $11 billion 4-year budget. And in that money, which by the way is not a lot. I mean, if Eric was here, he would tell you the budget of a hospital in New York can be just as big annually as the entire World Health Organization. So even though it's a B, don't think of it as more than it is actually in the health sector, because you know well, Andrea, that we're talking about spending in the trillions. But a huge aspect of that strategy is climate. And it's not a department. It's not a small initiative. It's not, well, we're working on climate and health in Malawi, but not Tanzania. It's actually saying climate is the greatest threat to human health in the 21st century. And as Marianne said, so much of what we're already doing is related to climate change. And so whether it's health emergencies and how do we prepare for and respond to them, whether it's how do you enable new innovations that can help advance climate resilience, whether it's how do you take the research on climate mitigation and adaptation and turn that into evidence and policy and therefore action, or how do you even bring in new sectors? I've spoken a lot over the last 2 days about the insurance industry. Insurance is a form of capital, and it's not available in low and middle income countries. I'm quite keen to say, how can the World Health Organization turn insurance products related to climate into a global health good, just like a drug or a diagnostic or a vaccine? And the WHO embracing that and turning that into guidelines can be critically important to mobilizing capital for climate and health, and also to being a critical partner to industry. So the work of so I say all of this not from a mindset of scarcity, but from a mindset of abundance. The last thing I'll say, sorry I've gone on so long, is many of us in the global health and development community are challenged right now. And again, it's not just about this week, and it's not just about the United States. This is a tough time for us, and we're coming out of almost a 20-year renaissance. But I do want to hold on to hope, and I want to remind everyone, because it's ultimately what inspires us, how much has been achieved. I was in a room last night that had pictures of people on the moon. I'm going to say people even though it's only been men, and it should be women in the future, but people on the moon. And I was reminded, right, of that. In the 1960s, humanity did something that we didn't think possible. Then in the 70s, we eliminated smallpox. In the last 20 years, 1 billion vaccinations have been delivered. Childhood mortality has been reduced by 50%. 65 million people's lives have been saved that would otherwise have been lost to AIDS, TB, and malaria. We should be proud and inspired and mobilized and energized by that success. Can we maintain that success with less resources? Of course we can. That's what innovation is. Innovation is about efficiency. And the technologies that are becoming available today should allow for that. But absolutely we need continued investment. So, whether it's Marie-Ange raising for Gavi or me raising for WHO, we have to keep focused on what we've achieved, how good of an investment it is, and how that investment needs to be across sectors.
Thank you so much for this really reflective answer, and also the hope and showing, coming from a place of abundance. And you mentioned that climate change poses the largest risk for health. And Marie-Ange, you mentioned the issue of misinformation and disinformation. And I think when it comes to vaccines, when it comes to the acceptance of climate change, when it comes to understanding what multilateralism actually can hold in terms of positive impact for humanity, we have so much work to do. And we also need so much more data for the intersection for climate and health to act. So taking all this, taking the risks of misinformation, disinformation, the risk on health, both on infectious and non-communicable diseases that climate change poses, but then the opportunity of partnerships that you've seen work. What are some of the, looking forward, what are some of the things that you can see work in this environment of contracting financing for international global health?
Yeah, I have to say I'm by nature an optimistic person, but I do, like Anil say, I do think that there is actually a real opportunity here. I think what matters and what I've seen work, and as I've said, I've not just worked in health, I've worked in a lot of different sectors, from airline to telecom to oil and gas to, in emerging markets, and always with public-private partnerships, is really, it goes back to the data and measuring impact. That's very important. And actually now, and talking about innovation, we have the opportunity to do this so much more, to do this so much more and better with some of the new technologies, to gather information, to be really laser focused on the intervention and be able to show. So that works, when you, and Anil mentioned it, in 20-year existence, we have been able to vaccinate 1 billion children, and the case we are making forward now is, now basically we can do double that impact in half the time. And we have the figures to show it, and it's through innovation, and existing innovation. I'm not talking about new things. And this we can prove. So, and I think when you can be that tangible, even the most reluctant, they have to stop and think. So I'm definitely. So that's very important, this return on investment, bringing it to tangible things, but also bringing it to your point on misinformation, also having a real-time and live expertise also, and from the ground, from the country. People will believe someone in a country that has talked about this rather than something that seems so. So that's quite important in the case that we make, and in the case you can make for climate change. And of course, they need to hear about the impact for them. That's very important. We are all about this. I think it's. It's not making people guilty for things that may be happening somewhere else, but it's how, the accountability, the mutual accountability, that works. I've seen it work in all the time, and that's very important. So I think the same can apply also to climate, of course. And the other opportunity that I see apart from innovation, and I think there, I would say in innovation is that a lot of the countries we work in, and of course, Gavi, we work a lot with low-income countries, they are actually much eager sometimes than some of the countries, more developed countries that have invested in past infrastructure, and of course it's difficult to let it go because they have nothing to lose. I always give this example. We started a few years back in Gavi a delivery of vaccine by drone. And I remember when I started it with Mars, people really thought we were crazy. It had never been done. And now we deliver vaccine 24/7. It's half the cost that would it cost through normal technology, and now we are doing it we're spreading in other countries because they come and see, and there was reverse technology, then the technology was brought back in the US, and now it's being done through Walmart and so on. But that's real, and there are so many because countries are ready, and so I think that's the opportunity. You don't just look, you can on one side of the pond, right? Mm-hmm. Because there are also the end users that need it and is ready to buy into it.
Thank you so much for these super powerful examples. And again, I wish all of you, so for those of you who haven't been here earlier, these were points that were made on earlier panels as well, right? That we really we can learn globally and not just, the knowledge transfer from north to the south, and about the speed and acceleration of not just innovation, but also impact, yeah. Right? So from the vantage point of the WHO Foundation and the work that you have to do in terms of building public-private partnerships and making the investment case for climate and health investments, what is your future outlook and some of the positive developments that you can see in this space, or your hopes around financing?
Well, I think, so a couple of things. One, the technologies are powerful, and I think they will help change the investment case. I didn't know until Marie-Ange just said that drone delivery is actually half the cost. That's spectacular. I'm just coming from a session in which we were talking about how do we use digital platforms to promote health information online. I'm a parent, and so I often think about the harms of social media, but it's a technology that can both harm and help. And so if you think about how those technologies can make the delivery of health information, particularly for mental well-being, that much more efficient, that's incredible. How you can take a limited number of healthcare workers. I was on a panel with a psychologist. We don't have enough mental health professionals in low and middle income countries. How do we amplify their voices? That's incredible. So I think there's a lot of opportunity to leverage technology to ensure that we can deliver health more efficiently. And I think that's part of the investment case. So I think, to put it simply, I think the math is getting better, not worse. Yes. But we still have to make that case. I think the second point that I would make is that I think there's the opportunity, as Marie-Jange was just saying, and I'm going to call out an old friend, Josh, here, because I was just visiting him in Kigali. The human capital in low and middle income countries is spectacular. When I was in Kigali, I visited someone who Josh introduced me to, Nick Hugh, who went from Zipline to then do some incredible health care work. I visited a command center in which his team, which was all Rwandan, were monitoring live supply chain in clinics. And so they could immediately diagnose when there was a power outage or how to make sure that they're responding to a problem. That wasn't designed by an American who then went and set it up at a high cost in Kigali. That was designed by people in Rwanda. And so I think it's incredibly important, not just from this, frankly, patronizing colonial attitude to say, hey, how do we work with the people in these countries? But how do we actually acknowledge that some of the innovation is coming from there? And how do we follow their lead? That, to me, is incredibly exciting. And by the way, it improves the math. And then the third part, because both of the two things that I just said are how do you improve the math, but you still need the capital. And I think the third piece, and this is incredibly important, I think I've said that about everything I've said, so apologies, but equally important, is that we need more diverse forms of capital. And I'll use that to say thank you to Daniela and her colleagues at Bayer. Part of what we need to do is make sure that the investments in these global health programs are seen as that. It's not charity, it's not CSR, but that we can invest in these programs and organizations because we've aligned with a business interest. We can do what Marie-Ange has done at Gavi, what frankly other organizations have not yet caught up on, but in addition to being the CEO of the WHO Foundation, I'm a proud board member of MedAccess. You can use capital creatively and you can call on capital from a wider set of sources. So the math is getting better because of innovation, where innovation is and the nature of technology and the sources of capital and how we use capital. There are tremendous opportunities there as well. That's what I see in the future.
Thank you so much, Anil. So different colors of capital and the power of public-private partnerships. And so we had Daniela Foster join us. She was stuck because we had to make, I think you had to make space for Klaus, is that?
Yes, it was a very, very active Davos moment here with lots of cardio. So I just got an amazing workdown, I'll tell you that much. And this is a hill, woof.
I also, I don't know how tight your schedule is. So Anil, so we're playing musical chairs here. Anil, thank you so much for joining us, but we will have Daniela talk to us for a couple of minutes. So first of all, just give a round of applause and all the best in your journey. Daniela, thank you so much for joining us. You are the Senior Vice President for Global Partnerships and Sustainability. I got this wrong right now.
It's okay, you're fine, it's all good.
But you also lead the World Economic Forum Group for Climate and Health. And so I'm not going to ask the more difficult question about the current outlook. I'm going to ask you the question about what's your hope for the future around public-private partnerships for financing for climate and health.
Yeah, so I was actually just in previous meetings about this. So I'll say a couple of things. One, I think like Anil mentioned, at the heart of what we're trying to do, you need capital. You need capital, you need scale, and you need partners. And I think when we're talking about climate and health, those are two areas that apply to everyone. They are fundamental to our future, and also they're going to require that cross-sectorally we work together. So that means governments working with the private sector, working with NGOs, trying to work through this. So what I am optimistic about is, against what can feel like a pretty bleak outlook sometimes, especially if you're reading the news these days. I think being here at Davos has been really interesting, and that this is one of the few places where you can talk about health, climate, market access, government, private sector, NGO, all together in one place. So I still remain convicted and driven by the power of people. I want to bring the people part back because there are so many smart, innovative, creative people from around the world, by the way, that are committed to solving problems. And this is what climate and health is going to take. One of the other things it's going to take is the right market dynamics. So I was just talking about this before I came here. And what that means is we got to get concrete around what the solutions are. And to give you a few examples, we've narrowed down the areas for which climate and health is most relevant, particularly from a sector perspective. So I think one key important takeaway, health is an outcome, not just a sector. It touches everyone. So we often think, okay, health, climate and health, only the health sector has to tackle it. No, we know the other sectors where this is most material. That's agriculture where it's most material. That's insurance where it's material. It's the built environment, all in addition to health. So what we're looking at is how do you bring those together to marshal the innovative financing, and Anil was talking about that. We need different financing mechanisms. It needs to look different. We're on the cusp of that as well. I'm really encouraged by things like parametric insurance that now, in particular, when I think about smallholder farmers that don't have a year to wait if a disaster hits, whether it's floods, whether it's drought, whether it's heat, et cetera. So parametric insurance is one really exciting area where, as a smallholder farmer, which, by the way, feed a third of the of the world and are often women, you can now get parametric insurance. And if the temperature goes above a certain point, you're immediately paid out. That's really huge. So we are developing innovative partnerships around this. We have a partnership actually with Pula, which is an insurance tech company, to look at how do you get directly to farmers, especially smallholders who are not insured. How do you make it easy? How do you make it accessible? We've been able to do this in places like Zimbabwe with 30,000. Then it was scaled to through a network to 1 million, and we'll have an announcement coming out probably in the next 24 hours to scale it to even more. So there are innovative solutions. It does take capital, it does take creativity, and it takes people. I will say I cannot emphasize enough the power of people and human ingenuity. So that's what's giving me hope, and that's where I see us forging the paths.
Thank you for these amazing and powerful examples. I would love to ask some more questions, but I've already been given the 5-minute sign. So how tight are we? Do we have 3 minutes to ask questions? I'm looking, who am I?
Why don't we take 2 questions?
Two questions, and then, great. 1, 2.
Sure. I'll speak up. This is, we are live recording, so if you could just talk into the mic, that would be great. No problem. My name is Ingrid Tyler. I'm a public health physician and chief medical health officer at Fraser Health, which is a health authority in Canada serving 20 million people. And I wanted to I was surprised that the health co-benefits of climate action didn't come up in this talk. And there's possibly lots of opportunity there to get small business and other capitalizing on those health co-benefits. So just for example, local food is good for climate
Absolutely.
change.
Yep.
Active transportation is, solves greenhouse gas problems. And there's one more. Planet-based diets are recommended for reducing chronic CVD, cardiovascular disease. So I really think that that's an area we don't spend nearly enough time in, either as health professionals who are interested in supporting climate change action and wanting to make a difference there, but also in WEF, I'm just surprised that we're not hearing more about the sort of business or innovation opportunities in that space that just has that 2-for-1 benefit.
So I love that you brought this up, and I'm going to tackle this. So I sit on the WEF Climate and Health Steering Committee, and I had mentioned we've kind of done this analysis to look at what are the most relevant spaces. Agriculture, exactly. That is where I would also say not only does it make sense, and to your point, it's everything from local sourcing, regenerative agriculture, thinking more holistically about up and down that supply chain, how we change it. There is tremendous opportunity there. And also there are some really cool examples that are happening. Everything from direct seeded rice that we're working on that uses less methane, less water. It's a phenomenal solution. So there's some innovation that's happening. There's also a role for things like local sourcing and partnerships. And I'm also seeing some of that. So I do think we need to expand. That's why I made the comment about health as an outcome, not a sector. Because when you do invest in these things, you improve not only planetary health, but also the health of people.
We have time for one last question.
One here.
We had someone here in the front row.
Hi, my name is Robert Ebe, and I'm based here in Switzerland. I was actually hoping that Anil would be here for this question, but he ran away before I heard it. Now, my question is about human capital and about competency of human capital. We hear a lot about human capital, particularly in developing countries, and how there's a lot of potential there. But you need competent human capital in order to be able to take advantage and maximize the technology that's available. Now, is it a case of, in these countries, that we have raw human capital that is not competent enough to take advantage of the technologies that are available? And if that's the case, then how do we upskill and make this capital competent? But is it otherwise, or is it a case of we do have the competencies there, but they just don't have the access to the technologies, perhaps because of money? And then, if that's the case, then how do we then navigate that situation in order to give them the access that they need?
Yeah. No, I think, that to my point earlier of really looking at country by country now, because the situation is different. In a sense, you have various scenarios. I would say that for most of them, they do actually have the competence. It's actually a know-how to develop. And I think, we gave earlier the example of a few countries that have been able to do this by bringing also partnerships with the private sector or different type of innovators. So this is definitely some of the things that we are looking at through some of our programs that we have. But I really think that you have to look it as a tailored situation by country. But there is most of the time the capital, especially the competence, is sometimes a matter of know-how. And that's why actually this public-private partnership or private partnership with other private partnership in countries is important. And also to the point that we made earlier, and I'm glad that you re-emphasized it, Daniela, earlier, Anil and I made it earlier, is really the different type of capital that bring with it also a different source, of course, of expertise. To your point about access to money. Because typically people are willing to invest. It's having also the horizon, what is it about, how are you going to reinvest, what's the proof of concept? And you see actually that quite a few people are willing to do that.
And I would just say, I want to give an example of one area where I think there is an X factor that is helpful not only for climate and health, but just for health, period, and that's community health workers. So if we look at our health systems today, it will take, 20, 60, many years to build all the infrastructure we need to support the needs of healthcare and humans today. We don't have time for that. Disaster and crisis and extreme events are hitting us now. An X factor in being able to deliver care, especially last mile care, disaster care to those who need it when they need it in real time, is community health workers. And by definition, they are in the community. They know the community. They are trusted by the community. That is essential. So this is one of the areas that I'm looking at a lot and saying, okay, what are the gaps? Some of that is financing. We need paid community healthcare workers, not volunteer community healthcare workers. They need to be paid for their service. They need to be a core part of how we think about the future going forward, whether it's universal healthcare or other aspects of healthcare. So a piece of this is finance. A piece of this is upskilling. A piece of this is policy and putting it into the continuums of care. And there is a piece of this that is rethinking the way that we do this. It's not always about breakthrough innovation. Sometimes it's about practical and last mile. So just, a few thoughts on that.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you so much for these really insightful comments and really a wonderful panel and a very engaged audience. So give it up for the great panelists.